grief and loss, trauma, mental health, alcohol and drug use, gender roles, anger management, self-esteem, sexual abuse, domestic violence, and the pressures of societal norms or real-life issues that affect men. Join Rolando, psychotherapist, author, life coach, and motivational speaker that has dedicated his profession to working with men to find a healthier alternative to cope and handle these stressors. Rolando believes that men are lacking in social, psychological, emotional, and spiritual support that is necessary for a lifestyle that promotes healthy masculinity. We invite you to join us on XY Spark, where we discuss issues that men face. At XY Spark, we believe there's a spark in you.
Thank you so much for joining us here on XY Spark. We are so excited that you've decided to become a part of our conversation. This is your boy Rolando. We have started season 2 of XY Spark. We're normally just vocal on the Podbean app, but we have decided that we wanted more of our listeners to be a part of our conversation. So believe it or not, this evening officially is our first live program here on Facebook and YouTube. And are we excited? Word cannot explain how excited we are, because this evening we have a special guest with us. Believe it or not, our special guest is a good friend of mine, a colleague, someone who has done significant research, and he has decided to be a part of our conversation. And so we have with us this evening Dr. Courtney Dookie. Hey, Dookie, welcome, brother.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to be a part of, I think you're dubbing this season 2. So
yes.
I am excited to be a part of season 2 and hope that our discussion will be able to enlighten and empower someone who is listening tonight.
Yes, definitely. You know, Courtney, believe it or not, the topic that we're going to be looking at this evening, it's an interesting topic. This evening, believe it or not, our topic is biblical meditation and healing the brain from psychological disorders. Before we go into our topic, Courtney, tell us a little bit about yourself, just for the benefit of our listeners.
So, as you mentioned before, my name is Courtney Dookie. I specialize in trauma work. So I work with a lot of individuals struggling with trauma. I work with couples struggling with different challenges in their relationships. And I'm also part of an organization called Dookie's Institute, in which we work with couples and parents. And as I said before, I specialize in trauma. In the last 6-7 years, I've been doing research and studies in the field of biblical mindfulness. Actually did my doctoral work on dissertation in how to use biblical meditation to facilitate neuroplasticity, that is a changing of the brain for individuals who experience developmental trauma. So in other words, looking at how to use scriptures to change the brain, especially for individuals who their brain has gone through severe damage because of trauma experience. So that has been my emphasis, my research over the last 6 years, and working with individuals, families, and couples.
You know, thank you, Courtney. That sounds like some really intense work, man. I mean, wow. Thank you so much. You know, believe it or not, we here at XY Spark, Courtney, we believe in restoring healthy masculinity. And as you talk about trauma, I wanted to just open with the questions by asking you, do you find that a lot of men are experienced or have experienced trauma?
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. In terms of trauma, men, women experience it across the board. But less men are coming forward to talk about their traumatic experiences. And because of that, it caused men to be struggling with multiple challenges because of their past trauma, self-esteem issues, anxiety, depression, inability to manage stressful situations. It is so impactful, Rolando, that when we experience certain traumas, men in our early years, it even impact how we parent our children, how we be with our spouses. So to answer your question, it is a serious thing you're discussing when it comes to the impact of trauma on lives of men, and for my work on the brain of men.
Wow. As I continue to engage more and more men, Courtney, and thank you for saying that, because trauma is definitely one of those big pieces where I find a lot of men, we tend not to want to talk about it. I mean, we're supposed to be tough, right? We're supposed to be the leaders. We're supposed to have the backbone, So if I come forth as a man to say, hey, I've experienced some trauma, I may be perceived as weak, and now here you are saying that based on your research, biblical meditation helps to heal the brain from psychological disorders. So are you saying that more men should start seeking to find some spiritual connection? How would you encourage some men who have experienced trauma?
Put it like this, Rolanda. In my work specifically, I look at the person, and especially I talk a lot about the mind and what the mind is. And ultimately, we go two directions with the mind. One, from a definition perspective, the mind is basically the movement of energy and information within our system, within our body, and in relationships. And that's a definition. When it comes to the faculties of the mind has 4 faculties: spiritual, psychological, physical, and relational. And all 4 faculties need to be balanced in order for us to function optimally. When a man goes through trauma, either in childhood or in their adulthood stage, once they go through trauma, all 4 faculties are damaged. Because there's physical damage to the brain because of the trauma. There is spiritual disconnection within the person and between that person and God because of the trauma. There's a psychological impact because now the self-esteem problems, the think I'm not good enough, the idea of struggling with things like anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. So psychologically, it's because of the trauma, in their lives, they're seeing the results. But you also have the relational aspect that's been damaged, because think about it. Developmental trauma, when a man goes through that, that's the inception of relationships. So the relational faculty is damaged. So that man now grows up and need now to be in a relationship with another person, with a wife, and be in a relationship with their children. That's going to be damaging. So now we're seeing physical, psychological, spiritual, and relational. And those are the 4 faculties of the mind. And when we talk about biblical meditation can facilitate changes in all 4 faculties and balance the mind.
Wow. That sounds very, very, very interesting, Courtney, to say that, more men can start challenging themselves to be exposed to that, but what about those guys who they don't really like to hear anything much about anything spiritual, Courtney? And we are in an environment now where spirituality has sort of narrowed down to what works for me.
Yes.
What I'm most comfortable with. And here you are saying, based on your research, there is no harm in reading the Bible. Is there any specific area that can you just read it randomly? Because
normally when I start with individuals, I normally say start with the Gospels, and don't just read it like you're reading a narrative. Read yourself into the narrative. So you don't need, put this 2 ways. If you're a believer, the impact is more profound. If you're not a believer, you can still get results. Andrew Newberg did a research in which, and Andrew Newberg is a neuroscientist at the University of Pennsylvania, and he did some research in which he got atheists to think about spiritual things. And over a 12 weeks period, he recognized that there were notable changes in the brains of these individuals who did not believe, but they practiced nonetheless. So there is benefits for people who don't believe, but they practice. But the benefits are even more profound for those who believe and also practice. And yes, I agree with you, Rolanda, because a lot of people, men and women, but a lot of men will say, spirituality is not for me. And oftentimes, I'll share this with you, it's because of their experience with the version of spirituality that they have been exposed to. And the version that they've been exposed to cause more trauma than benefits. And sometimes there's a rethinking of this. A lot of men think that to engage in spirituality is a way to surrender yourself to be controlled, or to almost to be less of a man. No. Spirituality is a part of who we are. It's our makeup. Every single person listening today they're spiritual, because that's how we were created. We're created to be spiritual beings. Doesn't matter if you're atheists, agnostics, or whatever. We're all created as spiritual beings. Therefore, once we engage in spirituality, for Christians, engage in the sacred text of the Bible, you will experience change. It's just to get beyond that pride that, again, I think I can do it all by myself, and I think within myself I'm all that. But deep down, any man listening to this today, deep down, you know that you're a spiritual person, and you know the pain you're going through. So just gonna start to do something about it.
Oh, Courtney, you use an interesting expression. You said something about the Gospels. What exactly is that? Because someone who has no idea or have never seen the Bible, they hear you say the Gospels, and that's like saying something in chemistry to a man who has never even heard the word chemistry. So what's the Gospels? What's that?
When I mention the Gospel, I'm referring to the first 4 books of the Bible. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And to think of it another way, throughout the word gospel, whatever, think of it another way, the Jesus experience. So when I say go and read, I want any man here listening, or men who are listening, just go and read the Jesus experience. Jesus, a man that lived some 2,000 years ago, has some profound lessons to teach us, man to man. So you're a man, go listen to this dude. Based on how the discourse, the experiences, how we interact with others. And as you read the narrative of Jesus, put yourself there as if he was the one speaking to you, and allow those words to sit deep into your minds and meditate, focus on those words. And that's the beginning stage of what we call biblical meditation.
Wow. So you're saying then that there's more to gain than to lose from exposing yourself to just basically reading the Bible?
There's a lot more to gain. There's nothing to lose.
You said something else important to know, Courtney, that I want to just spend a little more time on. You said that everyone is spiritual even if they don't know it. Yep. What do you mean by that?
Well, remember what I said earlier when I started out, that the mind has 4 faculties. Each of us, we have this innate drive towards a higher connection. And oftentimes when we turn that off, or we choose not to engage that part of ourselves, that's when sometimes we feel a deep sense of nothingness, a deep sense of Viktor Frankl, in his work, called it an existential vacuum. Because in that existential vacuum, we're trying to put alcohol and drugs and sex and work and multiple other things to try to satisfy that innate need. And when I talk about the fact that each of us are spiritual, that's in my mind, from a lot of men, women, especially for all persons, that vacuum is why we struggle so much. And that's the power of biblical meditation, is to close the gap of that vacuum in our lives. Because if we don't do something about that vacuum, we continue to feel this sense of this depth of nothingness. And we're seeing how that's causing suicide rate to go up, the mental illness amongst men to go up. So many different challenges men are facing just because we're not tapping into that. So for men who are listening, let's take a step back, reflect, and go in that reflective mode and ask yourself this question: why at times do I feel this deep sense of nothingness in my being, that doesn't matter how much money I have, how much sex I have, how much the brand new car I have, everything I have, and I still feel this sense of depth of nothingness? Ask yourself this question: why am I having this experience? Could
Wow.
there be a missing link that I'm not paying attention to?
Wow. And you're saying, Courtney, that it could be that spiritual connection, or that spiritual acceptance or awareness is what is missing.
At least in my work, I'm seeing, when I work with men and I go through different things with them, I can see that yes, physically they're healthy, they're strong, they're exercising, they're going to the gym, they're building muscles, they're doing all these things.
Mm.
A lot of them psychologically, they're also working on themselves. In relationships, they're working on themselves in relationships. But when they talk about the spiritual part, like, what is that? And working with men, Rolanda, I've discovered this. Especially men who struggle with addiction, men who struggle with different kind of a trauma, or different negative experiences. Once they start to tap into their spiritual experiences, their lives start to change drastically. And that's just observation of men I've worked with. I'm not talking about Christian men. So you're listening, you're thinking, oh, that's for Christian. No, the men I'm talking about are not Christian men. They're just men who start to work on themselves. And as they dig deep into themselves, they start to connect with the spiritual aspect of their being. And they start to reckon, wow, something is different. I need to know more about this. And so many times, Rolando, non-Christian men I'm working with in general, they just open up and say, I need to know more about God.
Wow. Courtney, what do you think are some of the barriers? Because all these things that you're saying are they sound so practical, but yet so complex. What do you think are some of the barriers?
The biggest barrier, one of the biggest barriers, Rolando, is, let's think from a church perspective. We have to be frank, right? Men, let's be frank with us. The church in history has not painted the best picture of who Jesus is. And that I think is a number one barrier. When you think of a church, you think of negative experience. Think of what certain pastors have done, what priests has done. You think about the negative connection. You think about there's a reality that, God forbid me put it this way, but because of the church, you probably have more people killed because of church than any of the world wars put together. So the historical piece of what church signify does not lend itself for people to see it as a place of healing. And that is why, Rolando, you notice I never say go to a church. I say go meet Jesus. Go get to know this person that for over 2,000 years, his name still rings loud across this world. And no one can find anything to blame him for. He's blameless. The churches and the interaction of human beings in these institutions caused pain. Jesus never caused pain for anybody. So the biggest barrier is that we have a mindset that the churches are corrupt and the church has caused these pain. Look beyond that. Look at Jesus Christ, who is one trying to teach us something. Again, I'm not calling people listening to me. This is not me saying you got to join a church, you got to become a Christian, you got to do any of these things. All I'm saying is interact with a sacred text like the Bible, see the meaning there for your life, and take those meanings and apply them to your life. We've read many other books in history, books that have profound impact on our lives. And in my research, I specifically focus on the Bible. So barriers, Rolando, I think barriers more of a mindset thing based on what others have painted of this thing. And a lot of people have this misconception also, a secondary point, misconception that if you go to church, it's brainwashing and mind controlling and all of these things are going to happen in church. That's not what we're talking about here. That's a myth. Again, don't get me wrong. There has been individuals who came on the scene in the name of Jesus who have brainwashed and messed people up. I agree. But if we can look beyond that and see the real power in that person that I'm talking about named Jesus.
Wow, man. That's profound, Courtney. And I'm glad how you mentioned that, because this is important for us to recognize that. And I want to reiterate what Courtney said, that he's not calling anyone to go to a church. He's saying go read the Bible and get acquainted with the person that the Bible is pointing us to, Jesus. Okay, that's so powerful. That's profound, Courtney, and that's really something that I think to think about. Because what I've noticed, Courtney, Hits, we spend a lot of time on everything else but our spiritual well-being.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Spiritual well-being in some person's world doesn't exist. I have physical needs, I get it. So I get all the things that I need to get whenever I work the overtimes. I buy the toys. I have the prettiest girl in town. My kids are in the best school. All those things are great. Physically, I'm good. I have good savings. We can go on vacations. But when you start a conversation about spiritual things, oftentimes you hear, hey, I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Or don't mention that.
So there's a thing, Rolando. There's an illustration thing. My wife uses it sometimes when we have this conversation, and it's like most of us, we have a dining table in our home with some chairs around the dining table, and each of those chairs has 4 legs. Imagine trying to sit on one of those chairs with only 3 legs. You will spend a lot of time trying to balance the chair rather than enjoy being and sitting down on the chair. You can't enjoy the experience of sitting down and just be on that chair. Your energy is focused on balancing the chair, because if you don't do that, you're going to fall off. And that's what it's akin to in terms of a balanced mind. If you're working on the physical, the relational, and the psychological, and you're not focused on the spiritual, you're like that chair with 3 legs and you still have to try to balance it. So you're not really enjoying. And that's why I mentioned earlier this existential vacuum, this kind of emptiness, because you're not able to just be there and experience what life has to offer, because within we're still feeling that emptiness, that what's wrong? I have all these things. Why do I still have this depth in myself? As some men describe it as a darkness, as it seems like nothing that they do makes any sense, because the more they try to get they still feel empty. And that's what we're getting at. I know your program, Rolanda, has to do with masculinity. And a big thing about restoring healthy masculinity is, how do we balance our lives? This is a call for men to go and live a balanced life, to restore what we call healthy masculinity. Because think of it, if I define the mind as having 4 faculties and also this movement of energy and information within our system and in relationships, it means this, Rolanda, that the same mind I talk about is the same mind in each person listening right now. And for a man listening now and he's thinking, man, but that's not for me. Think about it. How much will this contribute to your life? What is it going to take away from your life? You're losing nothing. You're just thinking about it. You're reflecting on it. You have nothing to lose. What's going to be so wrong in being open-minded to try this? Again, just to make it clear, not talking about a church here. We're just talking about coming into the Word of God, meditating it. Because listen, let me just add a few things here, Roland, if it's okay with you. When we go through trauma impact the 3, I call them the 3 major areas of the brain. We can break the brain down in multiple parts, but we think of brain stem, the limbic system, and the frontal lobe. When we go through a traumatic experience, the brainstem is impacted. the limbic system, in which we have the fight or flight system, is halted. It's an overdrive, I should say. The little part in the brain, we call it the amygdala, which is the alarm system of the brain. It goes into overdrive, it becomes so sensitive. And a lot of men, when this is going on in our lives, we are angry, we're easily flustered, we're frustrated, we have low tolerance for stress, we have high anxiety, we get because the amygdala keeps going and going and going and going. And because of that, the hippocampus start to shrink. So memory go down, concentration go down, focus goes down. And because of the limbic system being so overly active, or this amygdala is so overly active, the frontal lobe shuts down. Information is not going to the frontal lobe. Therefore, we can't make good choices. The part in the brain, we call it the orbital prefrontal cortex, which should help us with inhibition, meaning I'm going to choose not to do something. I'm going to choose to do the right thing. When we are traumatized, that part of the brain also shuts down. So we make choices, and then we pay for the results of those choices. And we're like, why did I do that? I know it's the wrong thing to do, and I still do it. Impulse control. That's what trauma does. Biblical meditation can facilitate neuroplasticity in all the brain areas. In other words, we can restore the structure of the brain by meditating on the principles of love and grace and mercy and restoration and faithfulness and connection. We can restore the physical structure of the brain by spending time in the Word of God. And that's why I say it's not just something I'm sharing, in the words of Karl Marx, something just to feel good. It's not a feel-good thing here. When we get into it, it changed the very structure and function of our brain. When we think about things like rhythm, if you go and meditate on what we call in the Bible, we call them the poetry or the Psalms, and think of the rhythm in those Psalms. When you meditate on that and you flow with that rhythm, and you sing them, or sing Christian hymns and Christian music, what those things start to do is to regulate the brainstem. For any man listening now, if you check this, when a baby starts to cry, what we normally do, we normally take that baby, rest the baby on our chest, and we rock our own body. So we start to regulate the brainstem, because the brainstem is completely developed at birth. So when we rock ourselves, we're regulating the brainstem. The same principle applies to us. So through Christian music, or meditating on the Psalms, or the Bible's in Colossians, one of the books that Paul wrote, in Colossians, we need to pray and sing songs. Those things are going to regulate the brainstem. And as we regulate the brainstem, we start to see that we start to regulate the limbic system. And once we start to regulate the limbic system, we start to get the frontal lobe back online. And that's when we start to experience the fullness of what I call manhood. Because we start to have a restored brain. And when we have a restored brain, we can function more optimally at work, as a father, as a husband, and as a man in society.
Wow, Courtney, man, listen, man, this is so powerful, man. I can see more of our XY Spark family going off now and getting excited, Courtney, and say, hey, I'm definitely going to try that. Courtney, our time is almost gone, but before that, what if someone wants to connect with you? Because I know you're an author, you have some books out there. We know you also have Dookie's Institute, where you do a lot of work. Tell us a little bit more about your work as an author and your research, and tell us a little bit more about what you do at Dookie's Institute.
So Dookie's Institute, what we do specifically at Dookie's Institute, my wife and I run Dookie's Institute. We co-founded. We look at how to restore relationships. So marital relationships, husbands and wife, we try to work with them to restore. We look at things like attachment, all those things impact relationship. My wife does the same thing. So that's family, a whole family system, looking at the relationship and the parental relationship also. And there's a book, I've written these books. This is called Neuroplasticity Healing the Brain from Psychological Disorder Through Biblical Meditation. We are going through a lot of the things I just talked about, how to use biblical meditation to facilitate the neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to change. And so this is one of the books I've written. The other one that just came out that we haven't promoted much, but it's called Mind Restoration and Life Transformation. In this one, I look deeper at certain aspects in terms of practicing these things. I talk about forgiveness, we talk about fear. So we start to look at more details on the different techniques in terms of biblical meditation. In this one, you will get that mind restoration, life transformation. To get connection with me, you can connect with me at Dookie's Institute at gmail.com. That's an email address people can reach out to me at. Or you can check out our Facebook group, Dookie's Institute, or our website, dookiesinstitute.ca. So, or you can go on YouTube for Dookie's Institute on YouTube. So dookiesinstitute.ca website, the Dookie's Institute Facebook group, or my email, dookiesinstitute@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, Courtney. You know, man, we could go on all evening. You certainly have give us a lot to think about. And guys, as usual, as we told you here at XY Spark, we are excited and we talk about restoring healthy masculinity. And this evening, I'm so happy that Dr. Courtney Dookie joined us. Courtney, we appreciate you. Thanks for the great work that you're doing. And guys, if you want to hear more, you're ready to hear the contact, reach out to Courtney. If you can't get him, reach out to me, okay? And we will connect you and let us continue to work together to promote healthy masculinity. As usual, this is your boy Rolando here on XY Spark. We do appreciate you, and we look forward to have you join us again when we continue our live broadcast here on Facebook and on YouTube. Please join us again. Our next presentation will be coming up on next Wednesday evening at 9 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Or you can continue to like, subscribe, and share to your friends. As we say, we believe that there's a spark in you. Thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you again real soon. Have a great day.
Please join Rolando next time on XY Spark as he engages us in practical discussions that promotes healthy masculinity and challenge men to live extraordinary lives. At XY Spark, we believe there's a spark in you.